Been a while, eh? The second stage of Overwatch Champion Series came and ended up being one of the most exciting stages we've ever seen. From partner teams fighting tooth and nail to avoid being put on fraud watch, to other teams and players proving that they actually can live up to the hype they've gotten, we got big payoffs. So let's take a look at that today. Hey folks, my name is Apostle, and this is Watching Overwatch, also known as WoW, the show that covers everything you need to know about what happens in Overwatch Esports. I know it's been a while, which I do apologize for right off the bat. Sometimes life gets shaken up a bit, but things are hopefully settling and we can get back into routine. So let's start things off by covering some results here from Stage 2. As always though, if you happen to miss them, here are my picks for what I'd say are the must-watch matches from around the world. For Korea, Crazy Raccoons versus T1. One of the first times in a long time that Raccoons have had some serious competition outside of Team Falcons. This might be the new top rivalry in Korea. In Japan, Reject versus Aplum Tiger, a match from the seeding matches in Japan there, where it was clear both teams were pretty desperately trying to come out on top. And in China, OWCS Esports versus Team CC, courtesy of Commander X's co-streams. Of course, Weibo Gaming's matches were fun to see, but I think this match did a much better job at kind of keeping you on the edge of your seat to see who would win. From EMEA, Virtus Pro versus Twisted Minds, a game that last stage would have been considered one of those hydrogen bomb versus coughing baby matches, but this time around, it was very hype. And then finally, in North America, Team Liquid versus Geek-A Esports, a game that you need to watch, especially if you're a former Nightmare fan or a current Liquid fan in need of reassurance. But without any further ado now, let's jump into our recap here of Stage 2. I'd say Stage 2 was largely defined by the Freya meta that we got, as she ended up releasing pretty much right before the start of the stage, and especially early on in the stage, a lot of things came down to who was able to learn her faster, who was able to improve on her faster. Some hit scans thrived, some looked like total frauds, but eventually things did start to kind of get more normal. And for our region results here, we'll start with North America. So starting from the bottom up here, we can see our bottom two teams that didn't quite make the top 6 are of course Steel Ducks and Supernova. Two teams that made it in from the promotion and relegation last stage have ended up right back on that chopping block once again. Steel Ducks, despite having a great, vibrant personality, that alone wasn't quite enough to really help them compete against some of these better teams. Supernova, they were able to get a win against the Ducklings, but overall they also struggled a lot. And I think a lot of Supernova's struggles came from more external factors. They were rotating out their DPS line and just role swapping there in the first couple weeks, trying to sort that out. And I think there were just a lot of issues behind the scenes that really kept these guys from reaching their full potential. Especially now that Chime is gone, it's pretty clear that this is not quite the same team that we've seen in the past. Outside of that though, we had very solid teams across the board. Number 6 and number 5, Sakura Esports and Extinction, very nearly identical seasons, with the only difference being that Sakura was able to win their head-to-head, but both these guys really impressed me. Extinction, of course, bringing in that old Avidity roster. They had some very solid matches, including going to a map 5 against Nightmare. That was a super hype match for sure. And then on the other hand, Sakura Esports, that's the team with Clear there, right? Finally off the bench and really showing that, yeah, he is considered a top tank for a reason. He doesn't get signed to all these top teams for no reason, right? So it was great to see him come in, get the playtime, and prove that I think he's still got a lot of talent ready to show us. Now, as we get into our top 4, the first thing that you'll notice, obviously, is our two partner teams, Team Liquid and Spacestation Gaming, at number 3 and 4 respectively. They had rough seasons, let's say. Team Liquid at least has the excuse that, they did make some roster changes. They brought in Zera there at the start of the stage, so they kind of had to get used to that and adjust, whatever. But Spacestation Gaming, there is really not a lot you can say to defend these guys. They had a disastrous stage, given the expectations that we would put on them. For a team that was expected to be the number 2, possibly even the number 1 of the region, coming in at a number 4 spot is just really not good. It has shaken a lot of people's faith in that team. It's hard to pinpoint exactly what their issue is. Some of it does seem to just come down to individual stuff. While all these teams around them are improving and grinding, SSG is just kind of stagnating and definitely not growing at the same rate as everyone else. So that probably plays a big part in it. Hopefully a result like this will be a bit of a wake-up call to get them back in shape as we go into the next stage. And finally, we have our top 2, Nightmare and Geek-A Esports. Geek-A, of course, signing the former Nightmare roster, but new Nightmare doing very well for themselves as well. Nightmare at this point just seems to be one of those teams that They have some secret sauce that they give to all their players. Doesn't matter who they sign, doesn't matter what team they've picked up. As soon as they get under the Nightmare brand, they will just begin pounding. They really looked incredible, surpassed all expectations, beat out both the partner teams, right? So power of friendship is winning yet again. And GK, of course, being a new team in branding only, a lot of people were worried going into the stage how they would be able to perform without Zera, given how much of a carry Zera seemed like for them last stage. But with their stage 2 results now, I think it's pretty clear that it was not just Zera, it is every one of these players just firing on all cylinders. And we have Maimon, who came in to replace Zera, and he is looking just as good. He hasn't missed a beat, he is slotted in perfectly, and GK are just continuing their momentum. And these players are really solidifying themselves as some of the best in North America, which is ironic given they only have one North American player on the roster, but I mean, it's semantics, right? As we get into the regional playoffs, we can see that while Spacestation didn't really improve, took a 3-1 loss to GK, Team Liquid was able to find a revenge win against Nightmare, a team that was responsible for one of their losses in the regular season. And Liquid actually went even farther than that, as in the upper bracket final, they were able to take a win over GK Esports and send them into the lower. For Liquid, this was huge because, like I said, they got third in regular season. There were question marks over, are they managing the roster correctly? Does the coach still know what he's doing? And so being able to get the win here, I think, was a big relief for Liquid fans to show that, like, thank goodness they are not washed. They're not as bad as Spacestation. They can still compete when they need to. Over in the lower, Sakura quickly lost to Spacestation, but Extinction, despite ranking lower than Sakura in the regular season, took Nightmare again to another Map 5 match, which, again, that's just incredible. Extinction, they really seem to have a good read on how to play into Nightmare, right? So I don't know if they're better than Sakura or if they just really managed to lock in when it comes to playing against Nightmare. But it is really interesting to see how that would work out for the power levels of those two in particular. Nightmare, though, they did prove that their regular season placing wasn't a fluke, as they kind of trashed Spacestation in the lower semis. If the regular season wasn't bad enough for the SSG fans, this is the moment that kind of just makes you take a step back and be like, what are we doing here? Because it doesn't matter how you look at it. Like, yeah, Nightmare is getting yet another amazing underdog story, but Spacestation, there is no excuse. It doesn't matter how many heads Chronic is clicking, Spacestation, there is no excuse to not be able to put a single map on the board. With the caliber of players you have, it just should not be happening. In the lower final, though, current Nightmare was dispatched pretty quickly by former Nightmare. GK, they went 7-0 in regular season. After that loss to Liquid, they came in, they looked angry, and they quickly went back to the grand finals, where we got a pretty epic rematch of GK versus Liquid. This time, though, GK was able to hold their own and take the win in a Map 7 match, winning 4-3. Honestly, just a giga banger match, one of the best matches of North America. Of course, that does mean yet another second place finish for Team Liquid. At this point, you're starting to wonder if they've absorbed the Philly curse or something. Despite the loss, though, I gotta say, Zera there on Liquid, he is looking like he's continuing to improve. He was just such an absolute force to be reckoned with, trying so desperately to turn fights that looked unturnable. Like, there were times when you thought Zera alone might have been able to clutch it out there for TL. Unfortunately, though, GK just a little bit too good as a team overall. It's like we saw with Shanghai and Dallas back in the day, right? Sometimes when you have a core of players that can just become a hive mind, it is just way too oppressive, and you need to work miracles in order to be able to beat that. And unfortunately, Liquid weren't quite able to pull it out this time. Now, moving on to EMEA, we had some pretty interesting things happen in this region as well. And of course, starting from the bottom, same as before, you can see Frosttails and a team called One Dip versus 100 Gorillas, formerly Quick Esports. So just to quickly explain that name, what happened is they came into the season as Quick Esports, right? The players were then allegedly signed to some Saudi org, so they ended up leaving Quick Esports as a result. Unfortunately, the signing that they had been planning on happening ended up falling through, which meant that now these players weren't on Quick and they weren't on their new team, so they were kind of just stuck in limbo, and they ended up making the name One Dip versus 100 Gorillas, because it was right around the time that that trend was, you know, becoming super popular. So a very unfortunate situations for the players, obviously sucks for them. And it did give us this gem of a name, which is now locked into history. But anyway, enough about the name, moving on. Frosttails, despite looking very solid in Face It last stage, They had a lot of potential, I think, here in Stage 2 of OWCS, but the roster change that they went through right after they got out of promotion and relegation, especially like Crocs being a big leader for that team, he ended up leaving them. I think that really just threw off any and all momentum they would have had coming into this. And as for Quick Esports / One Dip versus 100 Gorillas, they started off the season looking very, very strong. They were able to find 2 wins, and they actually played a super, super close game against Virtus Pro. I think it was honestly one of the most hype moments of the season, right? You had this team come out of promotion relegation and then nearly topple arguably the best partner team there in EMEA at the time, right? It was incredible to watch, but unfortunately, like I said, all that drama happened with like the roster and the signing, and you could see there was like a clear kind of dip in quality as soon as that happened, and they just weren't able to pull it together for the rest of the stage. Our number 6 team, Team Peps, they ended up being one of those teams that is good enough to beat those bottom teams, but just not good enough to beat anyone above them. And like the closest they came to was a map 5 against Gen G, and I'll get into Gen G in just a second, but overall, they just didn't quite have the strength to be able to really take it to that next step and escape that kind of bottom of the mid, right? Now, Gen G, this was an absolute disaster class of a stage for them. Like, you thought Spacestation was bad as far as partner teams go, Gen G was infinitely worse. They come into the season making all kinds of roster changes. They bring in Exodial, they bring in Who Are You, but something has been happening behind closed doors at Gen G. Someone has poisoned their water supply, because they may have been the worst coach team I've ever seen. And I mean, when you look at their results compared to the players they have, I don't think it's hard to see why one would think that. You have a player like Mag, famous for his main tanks, especially like his Winston and his dive in particular, right? And he's being locked into Diva jail and playing like Orisa and Hazard, the most random stuff. You have Who Are You, who for years has been arguably the best Genji in the world, and he's just not playing Genji. Like, I'm pretty sure this stage he played more Torbjorn than Genji, and the support line is just undergoing constant swapping. The comps they play don't make any sense. They're wrong for the map. The bans are wrong. I genuinely struggle to think of anything that this team did right. I genuinely believe the only reason they didn't rank lower than 5th is because their sheer mechanics were enough to keep them afloat above that bottom tier of teams. I don't know if Krusty has lost his touch, or maybe the players just don't work well under him. Either way, I fully believe that Gen G is by far the most disappointing partner team at the moment, and I desperately hope that we can see some improvement from them soon, because it was painful to watch. Next up, managing to slightly improve their result from last stage, we have the Ultimates. Overall, though, still pretty middling, especially you can see they're a -1 map differential, right? This stage they did commit to like trying to play with Twilight a lot more, but overall it feels like they really haven't resolved many of their issues. They were one of the teams that actually lost to Quick Esports when they were still called Quick Esports in a map 5 match. And their saving grace was that they were able to beat Gen G in a 3-0. In literally the first game of the season when Gen G was at their absolute lowest, right? So overall, not much impressive stuff here from the Ultimates. Our top 3 though, things get way more interesting. You'll see Virtus Pro is actually here, which is actually a drop from their result last stage. But in my opinion, I don't think this is because Virtus Pro were significantly worse. It's just Twisted Minds and OWCS have gotten a lot better. Twisted Minds no longer have Hadi on the roster, so they've fully committed to their Saudi tank line, KSA, and TVNT. That support line change is probably what's helped them the most, I would imagine, because irony, he had some really weird plays last stage, right? But Simple, he's come in, he's looked super comfortable, and overall, the rest of the team just feels so much smoother. And because the team as a whole is operating much more smoothly, it means that a player like Quartz can actually put his focus into being the carry player that we kind of know him to be, right? So great improvements all around, probably the most improved team from these 2 stages here. But now let's talk about OWCS, because yeah, while Twisted Minds may be the most improved team, OWCS has carried their improvement and just kept it going to the point where they are looking unstoppable. Junkbuck has turned this team into just absolute monsters. Libda went from a Pharah flex DPS one trick to now just genuinely one of the most solid players in EU. Checkmate is back to form. Landon is maybe the best flex support from North America, who's topping the leaderboards there in EU. They went from being a serious contender last stage to now just really looking like they have taken a step ahead of the competition, and they are now the team to beat. The closest they came to losing was a map 5 against Twisted Minds. And I think the funniest thing of their newfound success is that it comes along the new signing they made for this stage in Kellex. At this point, you got to start recognizing him as maybe the most underrated player in EU, especially in Overwatch League. So many people gave this guy a hard time. But outside of Overwatch League, he has just been on fire. The single worst result he's had since 2023 was when ENCE finished in like 7th to 8th place there at the 2024 finals. Outside of that, it's all just been 1st and 2nd place wins. I don't know what it is about this guy. No one ever thinks of him when you're thinking of like the best players, but when you look at his results, they really are stacked. Kellex is a huge difference maker, and I'm confident it's part of the reason why OWCS have been propelled to the top here. Now, looking at our regional playoffs, things went pretty much exactly as you may have expected based on the regular season results. Although Twisted Minds may have actually overperformed when you consider that they 3-0'd Virtus Pro in the first match. In the lower quarters though, the Ultimates was able to beat Gen.G even more easily than they did during the regular season, just solidifying Gen.G's place as a literal bottom feeder at this point. Virtus Pro made quick work of Team Peps, and then went on to make quick work of the Ultimates themselves, again, to be expected. In the upper final, Twisted went to a map 5 against OWCS, which was super close, super exciting, and that led to Twisted playing another map 5 against Virtus Pro there in the lower bracket. Twisted and Virtus really just having an epic set of matches throughout this stage, showing that Twisted has only barely stepped ahead of Virtus Pro, and Virtus is still right there on the heels, just waiting for them to slip up. And then in the grand final, OWCS, they just were able to find an extra gear and took a 4-2 win there against Twisted Minds, just cleanly solidifying their place at the top. And in that grand finals match, Landon just continued to have an absolutely lights out performance. Like, it's pretty crazy on a team with like Libda, who is like this newfound superstar, Checkmate, former OWL champion. Landon is really looking like he might be the best player on that team. He is just always where he needs to be. His Kiriko is incredible. His Baptiste, like, he's so flexible, and it doesn't look like he's missing a beat anytime. He's making everything work. And between him and Kellex, OWCS are almost starting to find their own version of an adamantium backline here. But I do want to make one slight note about this result. I don't talk about it here on the show, but there is the tournament known as the Saudi E-League, SEL. And in the Saudi E-League, Twisted Minds did actually get a revenge win against OWCS after the grand finals there of stage 2. Obviously, there's a chance that, you know, since it's not the premier tournament, maybe OWCS weren't taking it quite as seriously or whatever, but it does kind of lead to the idea that we might be seeing a really sick rivalry develop between these two teams there at the top of EMEA. As we go into the Midseason Championship and beyond, seeing these two teams continue to battle it out should be super exciting, so it's definitely something to keep an eye on. Next, let's talk a little bit about what's been happening in China. Here's what our regular season standings look like for this, and unfortunately we can see Team XX, despite them making top 6 in the last stage, they were not able to recreate the same success here. Going 0-7 and only winning 2 maps, they had a pretty rough time. Now, it seems they did have a lot of roster changes and stuff that no doubt would have affected their performance, but still, Team XX, they're a well-known name, right? It would have been nice to see them do a little better. Next at number 7, Homie E, a team that, while the name itself is new, does have players that seem to have built a pretty decent history so far, but not quite at the same level as the other teams which feature far more veterans. At number 6, barely managing to hold on to that spot, we actually have Little Sheep. This is a team that was actually able to come 4th there in stage 1 of China, this time doing a little bit worse. Something to consider when you look at all these results is that we're now dealing with a bit more of a proper season as opposed to the hyper-condensed stage 1 that we got. So in theory, these results will be more accurate, especially now that teams have kind of been able to settle into things, right? At number 5, we have a team called Zones. Again, players I'm not really too familiar with the exception of Waya. He's the support player that you may recognize from playing on the Guangzhou Charge in Overwatch League, as well as that Chinese version of the LA Valiant that we ended up seeing that one year. He's still around, still trying his best, and I would assume is probably being a bit of like a leadership figure on a team like Zones, where I would assume he's one of the older players there on that team and is hopefully able to kind of guide these guys and help them grow. So Zones may be an exciting team to keep an eye on. At number 4, we have Team Milty. This is a team featuring Eileen, Aming, Kyo, all very proven Chinese players at this point, especially from the Overwatch League. Aming, of course, making his legacy on the Chengdu Hunters, Eileen being a bit of a star player for the Guangzhou Charge for a long time. And he's actually got the DPS partner of Insane now, who you might recognize from Team CC. And Insane typically does a pretty good job of living up to his name. Overall, a solid roster with players that I'm personally really thrilled to see. They're still here, still competing, and hopefully they can continue to kind of push forward. Our top 3, though, should come as no surprise. These are all the names that we saw pop off last stage: OWCS Esports, Team CC, and of course, Weibo Gaming, formerly Once Again. Things actually have not changed that much for these 3 teams. OWCS Esports, they look strong. They only dropped a total of 1 map to all the teams below them, but they still need a little bit more improvement to be on the level of that top 2. And for Team CC, it's almost the exact same thing. They only dropped 1 map to the teams below them, that 1 map being to OWCS Esports, of course. But against Weibo, they got 3-0'd. And of course, from that, I'm sure you guys can connect the dots. Weibo Gaming, they got a flawless stage, didn't drop a single map, which is, you know, exactly what we'd expect from these guys, right? This is the Chinese super team. And considering this is a super team that has existed since 2023, basically, I think it is still going to be a little longer before we see teams really reach the level that they are at, right? They are just so much more experienced, especially when it comes to playing at like the top level. Team CC and Rock, they do have like the smatterings of talent, right? And if you combine those two, maybe you'd have something that could put pressure there on Weibo. But for now, that remains to be seen, especially when we look at the playoff results there for China. Here, Weibo did finally drop a couple maps, 1 to OWCS Esports and 1 to Team CC respectively. But outside of that, they continued their dominance. And Team CC versus Rock, that was also just a rehash of their matchup. Team CC winning in another 3-1. And as for Milk Tea, Little Sheep, and Zones, they got to make their guest appearances, but outside of that, they weren't really serious contenders. Here's the thing though, I think they have improved from stage 1, right? The only problem is Team CC, OWCS Esports, they have also been improving as well. So overall, the level of skill is improving, but these teams closer to the bottom will need to improve a lot faster than the teams closer to the top if they want to be able to catch up, right? And I think there is a good chance we see that over time. But for now, China's top 3 seems to be pretty set in stone. But moving on from that, let's talk about OWCS Asia. And we're going to start by talking about Japan. Now, in Japan, of course, we did actually have 2 groups, Group A and Group B. The results were actually pretty similar for both groups. We had 2 clear winners of each group, Viral for Group A and Reject for Group B. And just as a quick reminder, Reject is the team that picked up Vortex Wolf. So that's the team that had like Kalios and Edison playing alongside the Japanese players, right? The number 2s of each group, they actually finished with identical map differentials. In Group A, Plum Tiger, 4-1. You know, they were solid there in stage 1, and they continue to look pretty solid here in stage 2. In Group B, though, it was actually Please Not Hero Band who grabbed that 2nd spot. Last stage, bit of a meme team, known for the one tricks and stuff. But this stage, they toned down the memes a little bit, and lo and behold, they're looking pretty good. Rounding out Group A, we had Inferno and Lazuli, with Lazuli actually getting a perfectly even map differential. Obviously something you don't see very often. I would say that's maybe a little bit disappointing considering that, you know, Lazuli, they picked up Muse, right? Back in the day, Muse did used to be considered a very good tank player. That being said, it's been a while since we saw him in action, so you know, it wouldn't be fair to hold them to the same standard. On the other hand, in Group B, we have Rivati and Jcot making those 3 and 4 spots. Rivati was a name we consistently saw doing well last year, and they were absent from stage 1, but were able to make it in here for stage 2. So hopefully they can, you know, make it back to being a staple. And then Jcot is maybe the most surprising one here because Jcot is actually a team that made it in from Japan's promotion and relegation. When you look at the results of all our other promo and relegation teams, Jcot is doing better than most. So Gotta be happy for them to really show some success there in Japan. Now, as for our bottom 2 teams of each group, the ones that will be getting sent back to the Stage 2 promotion and relegation, we have Niam Gaming and Hayabusa Gaming from Group A, and Arise Project and ZG from Group B. Niam Gaming is the big surprise to me. I was expecting this team to do a lot better, especially when they announced that they'd be picking up Dodo. Dodo looked genuinely pretty solid in Korea Stage 1, so, seeing him go to Niam, which as a team did pretty good in Japan Stage 1, I was thinking that'd be a good fit, be a kind of mutual improvement. Unfortunately, doesn't seem like that's been the case, so we'll see if Dodo sticks around to battle it out in promotion relegation, or maybe he'll end up going back to Korea. Who knows, but definitely not the result they were hoping for. But after the regular season, we got our playoff seeding decider matches, where we saw Veril, Reject, Aplom Tiger, and Please Not Hero Ban all play against each other to find out who was considered the top dog. And we saw Veril come out at the top. Veril was always a solid team, right? But here in Stage 2, with Top Dragon on the roster especially, they really look like they've continued to level up. Like Reject, very good team. Their match against Aplom Tiger is, I think, one of the best that came out of the region in this stage. But against Veril, Reject, they didn't stand a chance. It was a 3-0 in favor of Veril. Our quarterfinals saw Please Not Hero Ban take a 4-1 over Inferno. So coming out of that, you'd think Please Not Hero Ban, maybe they're looking pretty solid. But no, they just got absolutely decimated by Veril, just like they did in the decider matches. On the other side of the bracket, Aplom Tiger 4-0'd Lazuli, but then got 4-0'd by Reject, which I was expecting that one to be a lot closer, given that they had just gone to a map 5. But, Reject, they just really stepped it up. Unfortunately, though, it doesn't matter how much you step it up, apparently, because when they went into the grand final against Veril, it was yet another 4-0. Like, this actually was the single most dominant grand final that we got across the regions. Veril is just on another level. Yes, while Top Dragon is there, and I'm sure he's a huge part of their success, the players like Nico, KSG, Cloud, they are looking so incredible. We've talked about it for a long time. The Japanese talent is continuing to develop and improve, and I think Veril is definitely the #1 result of that. It's getting to the point where I'm almost starting to worry for Veril because they might have outgrown their region. I really hope they're scrimming the Korean teams or something, simply because like Reject, Aplom Tiger, those teams might not be enough to help Veril continue to improve at the rate that they may want to. But anyway, next in the Asia region, we have the Pacific sub-region. In all honesty, considering the Pacific region, I think this was a really good stage for them. Definitely better than Stage 1. The level of the teams overall just seemed much more improved. We had much closer matches, I think, across the board. Just looking at the regular season, you can see here, we had 2 teams go 5-2, 2 teams go 4-3. So, hopefully things are kind of starting to level up over there. Going from the bottom up, of course, there at the bottom we have Mud Dog. Now, you may be confused because you're thinking Mud Dog, that's the team that won Face It OCE, right? Yes, it is, but the team underwent significant roster changes prior to Pacific Stage 2. Like, I'm pretty sure every player on the roster that won Face It is now on a different team compared to the team that we saw play here in Stage 2. When you do a full rebuild like that, it can be a little bit before you can kind of get back in the driver's seat. Now, moving up, we have Mengong 2, and this is a team that you may have expected to perform pretty decently because this is a team that got 4th in Pacific Stage 1, but like I mentioned, I think the level of competition really went up there in the off-season. So this time around, that level of competition really ended up hurting them, and they ended up getting 7th place. Our number 6 team, Team Fury, this is actually a team that made it in from the OCE promotion and relegation. So kind of like J-Cot, they were able to earn their spot and actually hold on to it, which, like I said, seems to be a bit of a rare thing. Above them at number 5, we actually have Cold Metal. This team is essentially Monster Gear Gaming from Stage 1, but they performed a lot better this stage. These are players that went 2-5 in Stage 1, now going 4-3. Yeah, they got a negative map differential, but still, I'm sure for them, they're definitely considering this like a big improvement. And, if they continue that upward momentum, maybe we see even more success going into farther stages. Also at a 4-3 scoreline, but with a much better map differential, we have Full House. Full House, of course, a team that has been around in Pacific for a long time. This stage, they picked up Yoshinori 2K, who is a name that if you've been watching Pacific, you should be familiar with. Very talented DPS player. While they didn't didn't make a huge improvement, they did technically improve, as in Stage 1, they went 4-3, but with a perfectly even map record. This time, they have a +2 differential, so that is improvement, okay? Progress is progress. And arguably, they would have finished higher if it hadn't been for Team I Love You, which kind of came out of nowhere. Well, I say came out of nowhere, but if you're like a real diehard Pacific fan, you may recognize this name as being a participant in Overwatch Contenders 2022 for Australia and New Zealand. They weren't very good. They pretty regularly finished in like the lowest possible standings you could get, but they have been around and they made their return here for Pacific Stage 2, and they were actually able to get top 3 there in the regular season with a 5-2 record, tying it with the Gatos Guapos. And the crazy thing is, their 2 Korean players, Hobi and Jongwoo, they were actually on the I Love You roster all those years ago. They've made their return here, and by the looks of it, they're not just still good at the game, but maybe better than they ever were back in the day. It'll be very interesting to see how that team continues to develop, because if they can do well, that's a great story, honestly. At the number 2 spot, though, we have the team that I alluded to, the Gatos Guapos. And this is basically a rebranded Miku fan club. Of course, the key difference here for this stage was in their tank and support line, as they actually brought on Rack Attack to be the support player. In the tank, it was Punk filling in. Punk, of course, for a long time has been considered one of the best players from the OCE region and one of the best Australian players in particular. And he came out of retirement again here to play for this team. He seems to have been a perfect fit there alongside Rack. And I mean, both of them are just 2 really good players that, due to certain circumstances, maybe we the fans don't get to see as much as we would want to. But now, seeing success, definitely a great thing to see. Finally, though, our top team, 99 Divine, getting a nearly perfect stage. I Love You was able to steal away a single map, putting a bit of a blemish there on their report card, but other than that, they looked absolutely dominant. Which, I mean, we would kind of expect given that they've added Peppy to the roster. Just came off that amazing season in Stage 1 with Wei. They also have Easy Hand there. So anything less than a first place would definitely be a little disappointing for them, right? In the playoffs, though, things actually did get pretty interesting. Fury was able to take a 3-2 win against I Love You. And this is absolutely an upset because when these 2 teams faced off in the regular season, I Love You won that 3-1. And, you know, they were a full 3 spots higher than them in the standings, right? Fury apparently just locked in when it mattered most, and because this was single elim, they were able to move on. Unfortunately, though, their victory didn't last too long as they got quickly put down by 99 Divine in a 3-0. On the other side of the bracket, Full House was able to take a 3-1 win over Cold Metal, but they ended up getting that result mirrored against them by the Gatos Guapos in another 3-1. And that led us to our grand final, where the Gatos Guapos were actually able to upset 99 Divine with a 4-2 win here. This is another one of those wins where it feels like, you know, the power of friendship is just winning against all odds, right? Like, 99 Divine, they signed Peppy, who was, you know, one of the best, like, Sigma players in the world. He's this super talented up-and-coming off-tank. But then you have old man Punk coming in out of retirement, and he just lays the hammer down, shows them how it's done. And of course, you have like Rack, Color Hacks, all these players who've been in the scene for so long. Despite losing 2 games in the regular season, when push comes to shove, they more than held their ground, and they were able to find that win. So I'm super happy for those guys. And as for 99 Divine, maybe they did choke a little at the last second, but like they do have very individual... But like their players are all very talented, so I'm sure they'll be able to bounce back from this. Finally, let's talk about Korea, the region with arguably some of the craziest results and maybe some of the most disappointing depending on who you're a fan of. Taking a look at our standings here, moving up from the bottom, VEC still there as always. You know, at this point, Death, Taxes, and Vesta Crew just not able to find any success in OWCS Korea. It's so reliable at this point. And it's weird because they did change their roster. They did look like they wanted to make improvements, but it's just not enough against the competition that they have to play against. At number 8 there, we have Onside Gaming. Despite this team looking pretty exciting there from like the Soup Cup that we saw them in, especially, you know, you have maybe the oldest DPS line in the league with Kilo and Ado there. Unfortunately, it's not enough to really put together much success for them. But I can't say I'm too surprised because they do have the support line of Opener and Irony, right? And when you consider how each of those players performed in Stage 1, is it that unexpected that maybe their Stage 2 wouldn't go much better for them, especially when you put them on the same team. At number 6 and 7, with a tied match record, we have Old Ocean and Poker Face. Now, Poker Face, at this point, you might think they're kind of solidifying their position as like that bottom of the mid-table gatekeeper team, but I gotta say, their final match of the season was actually incredible. They played against All Gamers Global, who we'll talk a little bit about later, but they actually were able to win that game. Like, their other 2 wins came against Onside and Vestacrew. They lost to Old Ocean, but then they went and beat All Gamers, which obviously just like throws a huge wrench into how you want to look at things, but maybe they're not the gatekeeper team. When they play to their potential, maybe they can be among the best, but they do need to consistently maintain that potential, which over the course of the stage, they weren't able to do. As for Old Ocean themselves, again, this is a team that is in contention for most improved from the last time we saw them. Last time we saw them in Korea, they didn't win a single match. Old man Ryu Jae-hong was in there just getting absolutely destroyed by all these young players, but this time around, they did pretty well. Like I said, beating Poker Face and also able to beat Onside and Vestacrew. Like, even in his old age, Ryu Jae-hong is still learning new tricks. Like, a little longer and he's gonna be the old man in a profession where they die young, right? Yeah, maybe his GOAT legacy got tarnished a little bit, but I respect him for still being able to put numbers on the board nowadays. Now, at the number 5 spot, we have what I assume will be a big surprise to most people, as Team Falcons is there outside of the top 4. In the worst performance that we've ever seen from them, they ended the season going 5-3 in matches. Now, the big thing to consider here is that Falcons underwent some pretty drastic roster changes, right? As they brought in Someone and Merit. And Merit especially, he's disturbed the DPS line a bit. Proper and Stalker was a lights out duo, but when you try to mess with it, it really seems to not end well. We saw it when Happy came in for Falcons, and don't get me wrong, Merit, super talented player, but it seemed like he's also kind of, you know, messing up the system they had going. And Someone, maybe a bit of the same to an extent. After Smurf left, Hanbin, he was really a rock for this team. He started learning the main tanks that he needed to, the Hanbinston, right? It was looking improved, it was looking decent. But now you have Someone coming in, and yes, Someone is maybe more flexible than Hanbin, definitely better at the heroes like, you know, Reinhardt, Winston, Orisa maybe even. But Falcons, they might be trying to commit to him a little bit too much, and they're trying to force their new additions maybe more than they should, rather than letting them kind of go in naturally. And so yeah, with all these roster changes that they're trying to figure out how to make work, Falcons, they end up biting off more than they can chew, and it does not pay off for them. At the number 4 spot, Zeta Division, a team that I think is less surprising to see here, right? This is a team that always fluctuates. Back in the day, it was based on how much Violet would be Ajaxing, and now it's just kind of, you know, I mean, they have Alpha E on support, and he's actually done a solid job, but with him no longer being on DPS, Pelican taking over full-time for him, it feels like Zeta's missing a little bit of the magic they had, right? And you can see that in the results. They went from top 3, top 2 to now just like barely being able to snag top 4. They didn't fall as hard as Falcons, but they've definitely been struggling a little bit here in stage 2. And I'm sure they'll want to be getting back on their feet soon. At number 3 though, we have T1, who have taken advantage of Zeta and Falcons kind of floundering. They've made the most of it, as they've shot right up, pretty solidly locking in a top 3 ranking. Their decision to bring in Vigilante to replace Opener seems to have paid off in spades for them, in all honesty. It's added a big level of consistency and reliability to the backline that I think the rest of T1 really needed. Zest and Proud continue to look great on the DPS, and Donghak, he might be making a case for himself as the best tank in Korea. I know the Junbin fans and the Hanbin fans, they're gonna think that's slanderous, but like genuinely, he's out there solo tanking, he's doing it all, and he is just looking incredible. Like, yeah, you might think only top 3, it's not top 2, whatever, but I mean, he's continuing to improve. He's bringing his team up to a higher placement every time we see them. Donghak might be the future. Speaking of teams improving though, we have of course our number 2 spot, All Gamers Global. All Gamers Global, and for anyone who's unaware, All Gamers Global is a Chinese organization that actually ended up picking Team We Are Yours, Wei. Now, going into the stage, this was a pretty interesting acquisition, right? After all, Wei had just lost Who Are You, and Then they decided to like pick up Top Dragon in order to be the replacement for that, but then Top Dragon ended up leaving as well alongside Peppy. Things looked like they were pretty dire for Wei. But they end up picking Jasmine up to replace Peppy, and they bring in Sunjun to replace Who Are You / Top Dragon. So we go into the stage, we have this team that kind of went through a mini roster mania in the offseason. No one's really expecting too much, right? But lo and behold, All Gamers, they start to pound. And the thing is, things start weird, because All Gamers starts week 1, still under the Wei title. They 3-0 onside, great. Then they 3-0 T1, and suddenly you're like, oh, hold on, what are these guys cooking? Week 2, though, it's like an immediate drop because they play Best of Crew, they drop a map, and then they go to map 5 against Old Ocean. So you're like, okay, T1 was a fluke, right? Well, no, because week 3 onward, they just turn the heat back on. They 3-0 Falcons, they lose to Crazy Raccoon, but that's understandable. Then week 4, they lose to Poker Face somehow. I think that's just because Poker Face unlocked Ultra Instinct for that match. And then they went and 3-0'd Zeta to finish things off, right? So a real enigma of a team, but you can't argue with their results. They did perform phenomenally at the end of it all. Sunjun and Jasmine, apparently they just slot in perfectly. And Sunjun especially, like, wow, what an insane improvement. This is, I think, the best result he's ever been able to achieve, and he's been absolutely deserving of it. I don't think anyone would have thought of him as a player on the same level as Who Are You or even Top Dragon, but he has more than proved himself, at least in my books. But going back to the standings, number 1, of course, we do have Crazy Raccoon. Though, like I mentioned, not without a blemish, as they did drop a regular season game to T1 there. And that was one of those matches where Donghack just went absolutely sicko mode, right? That being said, Crazy Raccoon, yes, they are probably the best team in the world, especially since Falcons have Giga fallen off. We've seen cases where, you know, like cough cough nightmare, they can drop games that they really shouldn't be dropping. I'm not saying they should have beat T1, but I think they definitely could have. And they won the rest of their matches so dominantly that, like, yeah, that 7-1 isn't a huge deal. And as we move on and look toward our playoff seeding decider matches, we can see even more that Crazy Raccoons, sometimes they do a little trolling, okay? Losing a map 5 to Zeta, 1-3 to T1, and then getting 3-0'd by All Gamers. When you're at the top, you can afford to make a few mistakes, I guess. T1, though, like I've mentioned, with the help of the Dong, looked absolutely incredible. Though, interestingly enough, every match they won was in a 3-1. They dropped the map to Crazy Raccoon, dropped the map to All Gamers, dropped the map to Zeta. But, you know, a win's a win. And then finally, as for Zeta, like, yeah, they beat Crazy Raccoons, but we've already established that doesn't really matter. So overall, they could have done a lot better. In our last chance qualifier, though, something interesting did happen, as Poker Face, despite the fact that they beat All Gamers, they actually lost to Onside Gaming 3-1. Then Onside went on to beat Old Ocean. Both of those wins would be considered upsets if you're going by the regular season standings, right? So because of those back-to-back wins from Onside, just pulling it together at the right time, they were able to qualify for the playoffs alongside Team Falcons. And I mean, Team Falcons making it there, no surprise, because even when you're falling as hard as they did, it's really no excuse to like be losing to Old Ocean or Onside anyone like that. But anyway, as we get to the regional playoffs, Onside was quickly taken care of by Zeta Division, which, I mean, thank goodness for that. Like, Zeta, they've been struggling, right? But if they weren't able to get a clean win over Onside, at that point, you just got to go back to the drawing board. So Zeta fans, they all breathed a sigh in relief when they saw that. But unfortunately for the Zeta fans, that happiness didn't last too long as T1 just demolished them 4-0 as well. On the other side of the bracket, Crazy Raccoons were able to put down Team Falcons, which I'm sure for the Raccoons, that's got to be like so cathartic, right? After how many times have Falcons just like locked in at the last moment and just found ways to win where it's like after a week regular season, it's like ridiculous. But this time the Raccoons, they're able to stop Falcons from becoming a Phoenix and put them out of commission for the time being. And then in the semifinals, the Raccoons, they went back to kind of what we'd expect to see from them as they 4-0'd All Gamers, right? A complete reversal from what we saw in the seeding. And you know, I'm not one to push any conspiracy theories or anything, but streets are saying Raccoons may have thrown the seeding deciders in order to meet up against Falcons down there, just to like really make sure that they get knocked out early. But you know, that's just a theory. But before we get to the grand finals, we have the third place match, Zeta versus All Gamers. And All Gamers, they continue to prove that their regular season success, it was for a reason. They took a clean 4-1 win there over Zeta. Sunjun just locking in, looking incredible. He absolutely owned Pelican. Despite the fact that on paper, you'd say Pelican is the better player, more experienced, been in like championship situations, been on better rosters overall, I'd say. Sunjun, he came in and he showed that none of that matters. All that matters is how good you are on the day of the game. And on that day, it was in fact Sunjun. Finally, though, we get our grand final. After that dominant win against All Gamers, they did go into the grand finals against T1, where they continued to look like the team we know and love as they beat T1 4-2. It was a giga banger match, don't get me wrong. Like every match Raccoons gives us that isn't like against a significantly weaker team, it just ends up becoming peak Overwatch. And T1, maybe they would have been significantly weaker a stage ago, but nowadays they really are fighting tooth and nail, and it was an absolute pleasure to watch. We saw Max get some playtime as well, which is always fun. Like, it's pretty easy to forget about him because Junbin's out there is on the starting roster, getting all the glory. But Max is a very solid player in his own right. Especially when it comes to the off-tanks and stuff, Max is like right up there on the level of guys like Hanbin, so don't be sleeping on him. Of course, this raises the question, are T1 going to be able to continue to kind of be at this level? Are they going to replace Team Falcons as Raccoon's new rival? Honestly, if you ask me, I think there's a good chance. T1, they are really looking like they're serious about improving. They got their support line issues from stage 1 figured out, and now they just got to keep on grinding, keep figuring things out, just build that synergy and teamwork, because that's the biggest thing about Crazy Raccoon at this point, right? They've been together for so long without any roster shakeups. They can just continue to refine. And if T1 can refine as well, we could see some crazy matches between these guys. But with that, we've covered all the important results from stage 2. And I mean, just looking at it all, this was a really phenomenal stage. Every region seems like it was just able to put together some banger matches throughout the regular season, some truly unexpected upsets. And yeah, maybe some of these upsets aren't so much an underdog taking the win as it is the theoretically better team just absolutely fumbling the bag, but end result is the same. It makes for an exciting match. Anyway, let's quickly take a look at what is coming up next. And first up on the plates will be the promotion and relegation for EMEA and North America. So as a quick reminder, that means the 7th and 8th place teams from stage 2 of the respective region playing against the 1st and 2nd place teams from the Face It League Master Division of the respective region. For EMEA, that means we're going to see 1Dip versus 100 Gorillas, Frosttails Esports, Team Vision, and Anomaly. And then for North America, that means we'll be seeing Supernova, Dildux, Dreamland, and Young and Beautiful. Now, if you remember in stage 1, both our challengers from the Face It League were actually able to beat our OWCS teams and qualify. So I think you'll definitely want to make sure you can tune in to watch these if you can, because if we see another situation like that, you want to know who to keep an eye on. And yeah, there are some teams that maybe you already know about, maybe like Team Vision, which has a certain Korean superstar on it, and also a team like Young and Beautiful, which if you've been around the Overwatch scene for a while, that's a name that you'll recognize from going as far back as like 2018. Took a break for a while, but back and ready for business in a new region. So make sure you mark your calendars. These will be happening on July 13th, with EMEA starting at 11:30 Eastern Time and North America starting at 3:30 Eastern Time. Some of these matches will be happening simultaneously, so they won't all be on the mainstream. You may have to look for like co-streams and stuff, but there will be a mainstream on the Overwatch Esports channel, so just keep an eye out for that. After that, we have the 2025 Midseason Championship Last Chance Qualifier. So this is a little bit different than normal because the Midseason Championship is happening at the Esports World Cup, and part of that means we have a last chance qualifier to allow one more lucky team to be able to secure a spot there at the championship. Now, the teams for this have actually been leaked, and while there are a lot of unknown teams, like teams that will just absolutely not even have a chance, there are a few names here to keep an eye on, so let's quickly touch on them. First off, Team Vision will be making an appearance there. I think they have their work cut out for them, but maybe the power of Korean superstars will be enough to let them compete with a couple other big names. Those big names namely being Team Falcons and Zeta Division. Despite not making it out of the Asia region, they are both here to give it one last shot at making the Esports World Cup. I think you definitely pick one of these two to be the favorites to qualify, but both teams have seen so many ups and downs, you really can't predict who is actually going to be able to make it there successfully. If Team Falcons does end up losing here, it would be nothing short of disastrous for them, I think. To go from inarguably top 2, sometimes top 1, to not even qualifying for a tournament with this many chances to do it, it's a rough look for them. Zeta, on the other hand, I'm kind of rooting for them. We haven't seen them at a LAN since the last Esports World Cup, and they made for some great matches, especially against Toronto Defiant. Personally, I'd love to see them get another shot at showing up on stage there, so hopefully they can do well. But anyway, that last chance qualifier will be happening on July 17th and going until July 19th. The Midseason Championship will be happening on July 31st and going until August 3rd. Like you're probably aware, it's going to feature 16 teams from around the world, including teams from Japan, Pacific, and South America. So it really is kind of the best to see how all these teams and players can compare when you just toss them all into a big melting pot, right? And so, just to recap, the teams we have confirmed to be playing in the championship: from Korea, we have Crazy Raccoons, T1, and All Gamers. From Japan, we have Veryl. Representing Pacific, we have the Gatos Guapos, ready to show off what they've been working on. North America gives us Geek Esports, Team Liquid, and none other than Nightmare, the power of friendship taking them overseas yet again. From EMEA, it'll be Alcadzia, Twisted Minds, and Virtus Pro. Gen.G notably losing out to Alcadzia despite being one of those partner spots, right? Then from OWCS China, we have Weibo Gaming, Team CC, and Rock Esports. That top 3 of the region ready to show off. You know, we did see Team CC there in the Stage 1 Championship, but now Team CC and Rock will have opponents that I think will be a lot closer to their skill level and should hopefully give us a better read on what they're capable of. Finally, we have Zocorp Esports qualifying from the Faceit League South American Masters. And then, of course, there is that one final spot for the team that manages to make it out of the last chance qualifier. So we got a lot of teams here, and they will all be battling it out for huge prize pool, and it genuinely is super exciting to see how the top teams will match against each other. But maybe more exciting is how we'll see the mid-table pan out. Like a team like Nightmare, for example, right? Is the third best of NA better than the third best of China? Or are they maybe going to be upset by a team like Veryl? Who knows? There's so many questions that this tournament is going to be able to answer. So especially for these players on an individual level, I'm really rooting for them, and I'm really hoping we can see them put their best foot forward there at the Midseason Championship. But anyway, that is going to bring things to a wrap here for today. It was a bit of a longer episode due to covering everything that I've missed, which, again, I do apologize for, but hopefully going forward, we will be able to get back into a more consistent beat. Make sure you tune in next week where we'll be going over the results of the last chance qualifiers, and probably also we'll be talking a bit about the Faceit League Season 5 so we can figure out exactly how we got those teams to the promo and relegation in the first place. But in the meantime, feel free to join our Discord server where you can join a community of people who just love talking about competitive Overwatch, love talking about the matches, the players. If that sounds like you, you'll fit right in, so make sure you check it out. Link is right down below in the description. And also in the description, you'll find links to everything else we've talked about today, including the must-watch matches and sources for all the match results and everything like that. But if you did manage to sit through all this, thank you so much for being here. Thanks for coming back. If it's your first time here, thanks for checking it out. I really hope you enjoyed, and I hope to see you next time, so make sure you take care of yourself. Peace out.